My mother demanded I pay my brother's rent again. When I refused, her rage exploded. So I gave them an answer that ended their hopes forever. I'm a 28-year-old guy living in a mid-sized city, working a steady job in the corporate world. My apartment is nothing fancy, just a modest one-bedroom I rent in a decent neighborhood. It's the kind of place where the walls are a bit too thin, and the rent goes up every year, but it's mine, and I make it work. My life is pretty stable. I've got my budget locked down to the penny, balancing rent, utilities, groceries, and my student loan payments. It's not glamorous, but I've worked hard to build this little corner of stability for myself. Now, let me introduce my younger brother, who's 24. He graduated from college about a year ago with a degree that seemed promising at first, but since then, he's been bouncing between part-time gigs and temporary jobs. None of them have come close to covering his bills. His financial situation has been a mess for as long as I can remember. He's constantly behind on rent, scrambling to pay for his car, and always living one unexpected expense away from disaster. Over the past year, I've loaned him money twice. The first time, it was for his rent. He was about to get evicted, and my mom called me, practically begging me to step in. I figured it was a one-time thing, so I transferred the money, hoping he'd figure things out. The second time, it was for his car repair. He called me in a panic, saying he couldn't get to work without it, so I covered the repair bill. Each time he promised he'd pay me back. But here's the thing, he never did. Not a single cent. Our family has always been close, at least on the surface. My mom is in her 50s, and she's the glue that holds us together, or maybe the duct tape, considering how things are now. She's protective of my brother to a fault. In her eyes, he's just going through a tough time, and it's our job as a family to help him out. It doesn't matter how many times he makes the same mistakes or how little effort he puts into fixing them. According to her, family always comes first, no questions asked. I've always had mixed feelings about this dynamic. On one hand, I care about my brother and don't want to see him struggle or fail. On the other hand, it's exhausting to keep stepping in when he's not taking responsibility for his own life. My mom's constant guilt-tripping doesn't help. Every time I hesitate to help, she reminds me of all the sacrifices she made for us when we were kids. She's good at making me feel like the bad guy if I even think about saying no. The thing is, my brother has grown way too comfortable with this setup. He doesn't even try to hide it anymore. He knows that if he messes up, someone, usually me or my mom, will swoop in and fix it. He talks a big game about job applications and interviews, but it's all just talk. Meanwhile, he's still spending money on takeout and streaming subscriptions while his bills pile up. It's like he's not even trying. This brings me to the latest situation. A few days ago, my mom called me out of the blue. I could tell from the tone of her voice that she was about to ask for something. She started with small talk, asking how work was going and if I'd seen the latest family group chat update. Then she got to the point. My brother was behind on rent again, and his landlord was threatening to kick him out. She wanted me to help again. I told her I couldn't do it this time. My own budget is stretched thin, and I can't keep bailing him out. I thought she'd understand, but she didn't. Instead, she launched into the usual lecture about how family sticks together and how I'm in a better position to help than anyone else. She even brought up how much my brother looks up to me, as if that somehow justified the constant handouts. When I stood firm, things escalated quickly. My brother got wind of the situation and called me, furious. He accused me of abandoning him, of being selfish and uncaring. He said I had no idea what it was like to struggle like he does. The irony wasn't lost on me. I've been struggling for years, just in a different way. The difference is, I've learned how to handle it without relying on anyone else. The tension didn't stop there. My mom called me back later that night, more upset than before. She said I was being unfair and that I didn't appreciate what it meant to be part of a family. She even implied that I'd forgotten where I came from, like I was some kind of stranger to them now. That conversation left me drained but also determined. I realized I couldn't keep doing this. Every time I help, it just enables my brother to keep avoiding responsibility, and every time I refuse, I get painted as the villain. It's a no-win situation, but something has to change. I just don't know how to make them see it. This latest situation started like the others. My mom called me, saying my brother was behind on rent again, and his landlord was threatening to kick him out. This would be the third time this year, and she wanted me to help cover it. She framed it like it wasn't just about him. It was about keeping the family together, about not abandoning each other during tough times. She said he was trying his best but just couldn't catch a break. I told her I couldn't do it. My own finances were tight, and I'd already given more than I could afford. She didn't take that well. She started listing all the sacrifices she made for us when we were kids, reminding me of how she used to work 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She said I was in a better position than most people my age, and that I should be using my privilege to help my brother. When I didn't budge, she accused me of being ungrateful and forgetting what it meant to be part of a family. Meanwhile, my brother wasn't exactly doing his part. He was still working odd jobs here and there, never anything steady, and he hadn't even tried to get a roommate to split his rent. He spent money on things like takeout and new clothes while claiming he couldn't afford the basics. It wasn't like he didn't have options, he just wasn't taking any of them seriously. When my mom realized I wasn't going to cave, she told my brother. That's when the real drama started. He called me furious. He said I was selfish and had no idea what it was like to struggle. He told me I was abandoning him during one of the hardest times of his life. The conversation escalated quickly, with him throwing every guilt trip he could think of. I didn't engage, I just kept repeating that I couldn't help this time. That night, my mom called again, this time even more upset. She said I was driving a wedge through the family and warned me that things would fall apart if I didn't pitch in. She accused me of being too independent, like that was a bad thing, and said I'd forgotten where I came from. She made it sound like I was the one causing all the problems, not my brother. The tension kept building. My brother still hadn't paid me back for either of the previous loans, and there was no sign he ever planned to. When I brought this up to my mom, she brushed it off, saying he'd repay me when he could. But he'd been saying that for months, and I was done waiting. My own budget was stretched thin between my rent, utilities, and student loans. I didn't have room to keep bailing him out. The arguments with my mom became more heated. She kept pushing, saying I was being cold and ungrateful. I pointed out that helping him hadn't actually helped at all. It just gave him an excuse to keep avoiding responsibility. She didn't want to hear it. To her, this wasn't about logic. It was about loyalty. After days of back and forth, I finally made my decision. I told my mom and brother that I wouldn't be giving him any more money. I said he needed to figure things out on his own, and I meant it. My mom was devastated. She said I was turning my back on the family and warned me that there would be consequences. My brother called me one last time, trying to convince me to change my mind, but it wasn't a real conversation, just more blame and guilt. I stuck to my decision, but the fallout has been brutal. My mom hasn't stopped texting me, alternating between guilt trips and outright anger. My brother is barely speaking to me, and when he does, it's only to tell me how selfish I am. The tension is unbearable, but I know this was the right call. Every time I've helped him in the past, it's only delayed the inevitable. He needs to take responsibility for his life, and I can't keep sacrificing my own stability to save him from his choices. For now, I've drawn the line. No more loans, no more handouts. If he wants to turn things around, he'll have to do it himself. I just hope the rest of the family can see that this isn't about abandoning him. It's about giving him the push he needs to finally grow up. But judging by the reaction so far, I'm not holding my breath. The fallout started almost immediately. The day after I told my mom and brother I wouldn't be giving him any more money, my phone was blowing up with calls and texts. My mom wasn't holding back. She called me selfish, ungrateful, and even cold-hearted. She said I didn't understand what family was about and accused me of turning my back on my brother during a time when he needed me most. Every message was a mix of guilt trips and anger, making it clear she thought I was the problem, not my brother. My brother was no better. He sent me a long message saying I was abandoning him and proving that I never truly cared about him. He brought up how I was lucky to have a stable job and how it wasn't fair that I wouldn't share what I had to help him out. He threw in a line about how I'd regret this one day when I'd need help and no one would be there for me. It was classic manipulation, but it still stung to read. The tension spread quickly to the rest of the family. My mom made it her mission to call everyone and tell them her version of what happened. Suddenly, I was the villain of the family group chat. A couple of my cousins reached out to ask if everything was okay, clearly trying to stay neutral, but it was obvious they'd heard the story. My aunt, who's always been close to my mom, made a passive-aggressive post on Facebook about how some people forget their roots when they get a little success. I didn't respond, but I knew it was directed at me. My siblings were also dragged into the mess. I've got 2 younger sisters, and they were caught in the middle. One of them sided with me, saying she understood why I had to draw a line. The other thought I was being too harsh, and that I should have at least covered this last rent payment to give him more time. Their disagreement only made things more complicated, and now family group calls are basically a battlefield. At this point, my mom and I weren't even speaking directly. She'd send me guilt-laden texts every day, accusing me of ruining the family and making things worse for everyone. She hinted that if I didn't help, she might step in herself, even though I know she doesn't have the money to do it. The silence between us during family gatherings was unbearable, and it felt like every interaction was filled with unspoken tension. Meanwhile, my brother was supposedly looking for a job, but it was the same half-hearted effort as always. He posted on social media about attending a couple of interviews, but nothing came of them. I overheard from my sister that he wasn't applying to anything outside of his dream job list, which was full of positions he wasn't even qualified for. It was clear he wasn't taking his situation seriously. He even made a post complaining about how hard it is for people like him to get ahead when the system is stacked against them. The comments were full of sympathy from his friends, but no one seemed to point out that he wasn't exactly helping himself. The guilt trips from my mom kept coming. She started sending me long messages about how hard she worked to raise us and how I was supposed to support my brother because family always helps family. She even threw in that I was being heartless for not giving him a chance to get back on his feet. It was relentless. At one point, she told me I was forcing her into a corner, implying that I'd have to take responsibility for whatever happened to my brother if I didn't change my mind. There was a brief moment where my brother tried to apologize. He called me and said he was sorry for the way he'd reacted, but the apology felt hollow. He quickly shifted the conversation to how much pressure he was under and how hard it was to make ends meet. It didn't feel genuine. It felt like another attempt to manipulate me into changing my mind. I told him I couldn't keep helping unless he started making real changes, and he hung up on me. Looking back, this wasn't new. My brother has been relying on me or someone else to fix his problems for years. I've covered for him more times than I can count, and every time he promises it'll be the last, but it never is. This time, I decided I wasn't going to let the pattern continue. I needed to set boundaries, no matter how difficult it was or how much backlash I got from the family. Eventually, my brother gave me an ultimatum. He told me that if I didn't help him, he'd consider our relationship over. He said he couldn't believe I was willing to let him fail and that it proved I didn't care about him. It was a heavy statement, but I stood firm. I told him I wouldn't be giving him any more money unless he started showing genuine effort to get back on track. That didn't go over well. My mom was furious when she found out and told me I was breaking the family apart. My brother blocked me on social media and hasn't reached out since. The tension with my mom is still ongoing, but I haven't backed down. At this point, I'm done being the safety net. If my brother wants to fix his life, he'll have to do it himself. A week after my brother gave me the ultimatum about helping him or losing our relationship, he followed through. I got a notification that he blocked me on all social media. He didn't send a text or make a call, he just disappeared from my digital life. I wasn't surprised. He'd always been more about dramatic gestures than honest conversations. My mom, of course, was quick to pick up the torch. She called me late that night. The conversation wasn't anything new. She leaned hard into guilt, saying I was not a good sibling and had no heart. She told me I didn't understand how hard things were for my brother and how I was making it worse by refusing to help. I tried to keep my responses calm and measured, but it didn't seem to matter. Every answer I gave only fueled her frustration. She ended the call by saying she didn't know who I'd become, but that she was disappointed in me as a son. While all of this was happening, my friends became an unexpected lifeline. I don't usually bring personal family drama into my friend group, but I needed to vent. When I told them what was going on, they were shocked, not at my decision, but at how long I'd been putting up with this dynamic. They reminded me that I wasn't responsible for my brother's choices, especially when he wasn't doing anything to help himself. Hearing that from people outside the situation made a big difference. Then, out of nowhere, my sister called me to vent about something unrelated, and the topic of my brother came up. She told me he'd been posting vague, passive-aggressive updates on social media. Things like, it's hard when the people who are supposed to love you the most turn their backs on you, and some people care more about their wallets than their family. Apparently, some of his friends even started commenting things like, you deserve better, and cut out the toxic people. It was obvious he was painting himself as the victim to anyone who would listen. What really pushed me over the edge, though, was when I heard about where his money had been going. My sister let it slip that he'd spent most of his paycheck on takeout, online subscriptions, and even some unnecessary gadgets over the past few months. He wasn't struggling because life had dealt him a bad hand. He was struggling because he refused to prioritize. I realized that every dollar I'd given him in the past had probably gone the same way, and it reinforced my decision to stop enabling him. My mom, meanwhile, wasn't backing down. She called again a few days later, this time with an ultimatum of her own. She said I was putting her in a position where she'd have to step in to help my brother, even though she couldn't afford it. She said if she ended up in financial trouble because of this, it would be on me. She brought up the idea that I was ruining the family, saying that my refusal to help was creating a divide that might never heal. I didn't engage with her arguments. At this point, It felt like we were running in circles. As my own financial pressures started mounting, thanks to rising rent and a surprise medical bill, I knew I had no room to bend. The constant demands for money were draining, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own stability just to keep the peace. I decided to have a serious conversation with my dad about the situation. He's always been more level-headed, and I hoped he might help mediate. The conversation was tough but necessary. I explained everything, how much I'd loaned my brother, the broken promises, and how I felt trapped in this cycle of enabling. My dad listened without interrupting, and while he didn't outright take my side, he admitted that my brother needed to step up. He didn't think I was wrong to draw boundaries, but he also warned me that the fallout might take years to repair. A few days later, my brother reached out for what I thought might be a turning point. He sent a long message apologizing for his behavior. He said he regretted lashing out and acknowledged that he hadn't been the best brother. For a moment, I thought this might be a genuine attempt to mend things, but as I read further, it became clear he wasn't owning up to much. The apology quickly shifted into an explanation of how he felt abandoned and how hard it was to make ends meet. By the end of the message, he was asking if I'd reconsider helping him just this once so he could get back on track. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process whether this was a real apology or just another manipulation. The more I thought about it, the more I realized it was the latter. He wasn't taking responsibility, he was just using a different tactic to get what he wanted. I responded simply, saying I wouldn't be giving him any money unless he showed real effort to change. He didn't reply after that. The rift in the family felt permanent. My mom's disappointment hung over every interaction like a storm cloud. My brother stopped trying to reach out entirely. Even small family updates felt tense, as if everyone was walking on eggshells. I hated the way things had turned out, but I also knew I couldn't keep sacrificing myself to fix a problem I didn't create. For now, I'm holding firm. The boundary is set, and I'm not moving it. If my brother wants to change, he'll have to do it without me funding his mistakes. It's not the resolution I hoped for, but maybe it's the one he and the rest of the family need to finally face reality. After my last conversation with my brother, things went quiet for a while. At least he didn't respond to my message, and I didn't hear from him again. My mom wasn't silent, though. She continued to reach out, usually with long, guilt-heavy texts about how I was tearing the family apart. Calls from her were shorter but just as sharp, filled with the same accusations about my lack of empathy and how my actions were ruining everything. I started to feel like every interaction with her was just another fight waiting to happen, so I kept my distance. The silence from the rest of my family didn't last long. A few days after my brother blocked me on social media, I started getting messages from extended family members. At first, I expected them to take my mom's side, but I was surprised. A few aunts and cousins actually reached out to support me. One cousin in particular told me she'd been in a similar situation with her sibling and commended me for setting boundaries. Another aunt mentioned she thought my brother had been taking advantage of me for years, but never wanted to step in and say anything. It was unexpected, but their words helped me feel like I wasn't entirely alone. Meanwhile, my brother wasn't sitting idle. Since he'd cut ties with me, he started working his way down the family tree. My sister told me he'd been reaching out to just about everyone, asking for money. From what I heard, his strategy wasn't going well. Most of the extended family had either refused outright or ignored him altogether. My brother wasn't exactly subtle about why he needed the cash, and most of them weren't interested in stepping into the mess between us. The few relatives who were tempted to help quickly backed off when they realized he wasn't interested in changing his spending habits. As for my mom, she wasn't ready to give up. She called me one last time in what felt like a desperate attempt to make me cave. She went over the same arguments she'd been making for weeks, that family comes first, that I didn't understand my brother's struggles, and that I was the one creating the divide. This time, though, I decided to push back. I suggested we try family therapy, hoping it might give us a neutral space to talk things out. She rejected the idea immediately, saying we didn't need outsiders to fix our problems. It was clear she wasn't interested in solving anything unless the solution involved me stepping back into the role of financial safety net. On my end, things were finally starting to stabilize. With no more unexpected handouts, my budget was starting to recover. I managed to pay off a few lingering expenses and even set aside some money for savings, a rare luxury for me. Knowing I was in control of my finances again only reinforced my decision to stand firm. My brother, on the other hand, seemed to be spinning his wheels. Word got back to me that he'd started applying for jobs more frequently, but they were still the kind of roles he was either underqualified for or overqualified for. Nothing that could actually help him get back on his feet. He kept leaning into temporary gigs but avoided committing to anything long-term. It felt like he was doing just enough to say he was trying without actually making meaningful progress. His behavior also started to become more erratic. My sister mentioned he'd been spending more time drinking and going out with friends, even though he claimed he was broke. There were even whispers from family members about him borrowing money from people outside the family, people who weren't as willing to let it slide if he didn't pay them back. I worried about him, but there wasn't much I could do from a distance, especially when every attempt I made to help him in the past had only backfired. The strain between my mom and me grew heavier with each passing week. I noticed it in the little things, her tone during conversations, the way she avoided talking to me during family calls, and the fact that she was constantly venting to other relatives about how I was unrecognizable these days. But it wasn't just about the fights anymore. It was the emotional toll of knowing our relationship wasn't what it used to be, and that it might not recover anytime soon. I stuck to my boundaries, though. Every time I felt tempted to step back in and help, I reminded myself that doing so wouldn't fix the underlying issue. My brother needed to take responsibility for his choices, and my mom needed to stop enabling him. Giving in would only restart the cycle, and I wasn't willing to go down that road again. About a month after our last interaction, my brother sent me an unexpected message. It was an apology. This time, it felt more heartfelt. He admitted he'd been wrong to lash out and acknowledged that he hadn't been managing his life well. He said he wanted to make things right and asked if we could talk. I couldn't tell if the apology was genuine or just another tactic to get me back on his side, but I agreed to hear him out. We haven't had that conversation yet, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like there's a chance things might move in a better direction. I don't know if this is the start of real change or just another false start, but either way, I'm not backing down. I've made my decision and I'm sticking to it. Whether my family can accept that or not is up to them. But for now, I'm finally at peace with the boundaries I've set. The fallout from my decision lingered for a while, but over time, the dust started to settle. My mom still found ways to criticize me for ruining the family, but her words felt different now. Less forceful, almost resigned. She'd bring up my brother in passing, mentioning how hard things were for him. But it seemed like she was running out of steam. The constant calls and texts about how I needed to step up became less frequent. What surprised me the most was how many of my friends continued to show their support. A couple of them shared stories about their own families, where they'd been pressured to take on responsibilities they couldn't handle. Hearing how they navigated those situations made me feel like I wasn't alone. One friend even joked that saying no to family should be considered a life skill, which honestly felt pretty accurate. Around this time, my brother's situation started to shift. It wasn't a huge transformation, but I started hearing from my sister that he was actually applying for jobs more seriously. He landed a part-time position at a local store, and while it wasn't enough to cover all his expenses, it was a step in the right direction. He was even talking about cutting back on unnecessary spending and focusing on saving for the first time in years. It was slow progress, but it was progress. My mom, however, wasn't ready to let go of her narrative. She kept insisting that I'd forced my brother into this situation and that I was being stubborn for no reason. But something had shifted in me. Her words didn't hit the same way they used to. I wasn't looking for her approval anymore. Instead, I focused on reinforcing my boundaries. Every time she brought it up, I reminded her that my brother needed to take responsibility for himself, and that my decision wasn't about punishing him, it was about helping him grow. Eventually, I decided to suggest family therapy again. I didn't expect much, given her reaction the first time, but to my surprise, she seemed more open to the idea. I think the ongoing tension was wearing on her, and maybe she realized that we weren't going to move forward without some kind of outside help. We scheduled a session, and while it wasn't a magical fix, it felt like a step toward understanding each other better. Over the next few weeks, the tension between my mom and me started to ease. Our conversations were less heated, though they still felt cautious. It was clear that we were both trying to repair the relationship, even if neither of us was fully ready to let go of the past. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for my brother, he was slowly learning how to stand on his own. He started budgeting more carefully and took on additional shifts at work to make ends meet. He still had moments where he'd reach out to family members for help, but they were fewer and farther between. It was obvious he wasn't thrilled about being independent, but he was making it work. My sister told me he'd even mentioned feeling proud of himself for the first time in a long time. I stayed firm on my decision not to loan him money. Whenever he reached out, I reminded him that my support would come in the form of advice or encouragement, not financial assistance. At first, he didn't take it well, but over time, he stopped asking. It felt like he was finally starting to accept that the old dynamic wasn't coming back. About a month ago, my brother reached out again. This time, his apology felt different. He admitted that he'd been unfair to me and that he understood why I made the choices I did. He didn't ask for anything. He just wanted to let me know that he appreciated the boundaries I'd set, even if it had taken him a while to see it. For the first time, it felt like we were on the same page. Shortly after, I had a final, honest conversation with my mom about everything that had happened. I explained my perspective, not just about my brother, but about what it had been like to feel responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. I told her that stepping back wasn't about abandoning the family. It was about making sure I could take care of myself too. She listened, and while she didn't fully agree, she seemed to understand. For the first time in months, the conversation didn't feel like a battle. Since then, things have been slowly improving. My brother and I are rebuilding our relationship, one step at a time. He's still figuring things out, but I can see that he's trying. My mom and I are on better terms, though we're still careful around certain topics. The rest of the family seems to have accepted the new normal, and the drama has finally started to fade into the background. On a personal level, I feel more stable than I have in years. My finances are in good shape, and I'm no longer constantly stressed about unexpected requests for money. I've learned how to say no, even when it's uncomfortable. And I've realized that setting boundaries doesn't make me a bad person, it makes me a healthier one. Looking back, this experience has completely changed how I view family dynamics. I used to think that being there for family meant saying yes to everything, no matter the cost. Now, I understand that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and accountability, not one-sided sacrifices. It hasn't been easy, but I know I made the right decision for myself, for my brother, and for the family as a whole.